lot to me. They mean more than my family.
I don't know who I would be without Take That. Just serves as the centre of me.
The Backstreet Boys were popular, but nobody I knew was as hardcore as me.
I changed. My parents said I changed. No, I swear to God, John looked directly at me.
We're all obsessed, but why? Why are we so obsessed?
Music is the only thing that can kind of bridge the gap, even to the next day.
My dad, when I had posters up, he tore them down.
I was born in Istanbul, but my mom always says, I wish we never came to America because of how we turned out.
The feelings are there. They come back.
Oh my God, that was the best concert I've actually ever been to. Tour bus, tour bus.
Hello, welcome to this BFI at Home event and Women with a Movie Camera Q&A. My name is Lucy Ford and I'm an entertainment reporter and an unashamed fangirl. So tonight I'm really excited to be joined by director Jessica Leski to talk about her new film, I Used to Be Normal, a Boyband Fangirl Story. Jessica, thank you so much for talking to me about this film.
Thank you for having me.
I'm very excited. It could not be more like my brand of film if it tried. So this film follows 4 fans of different ages as they sort of tell us about their experiences of being fans of various boy bands, from the Beatles to One Direction. I want to take it sort of back to the very beginning. What made you want to make this film?
So it was 2011 and I discovered One Direction. I'd been like vaguely aware of them, but something happened and it just took me over in a way that a boy band never had and a piece of pop culture hadn't for a long time. The last thing was probably Dawson's Creek that I remembered feeling that kind of obsessive about. So I'd never been interested in a boy band before. And so I was 31 at that time. So I kind of had missed the usual window for boy band love and obsession, and had been very dismissive of it as a teenager. You know, I was at school at the height of, you know, what are considered often the glory days of boy bandom. You know, Backstreet Boys and NSYNC and Five and all those, Take That, they were all really big when I was in high school. And I was like, the music is bad, the fans are dumb, the boys are ugly. It didn't interest me at all. So yeah, when One Direction caught my attention, I was like, have I missed out on something amazing for the last like 15 years? And what about what about boy bands that became before? So it was simultaneously my interest in boy bands, and then also realizing, because I'd never really been a fan of something when the internet had been such a big part of my life, discovering that the fans were not at all not totally what I expected. Yes, they can be full on, but also they were so funny and clever and creative. And I just realized I'd prejudged them totally. And so I wanted to know more about the fans, but also the phenomena of, once I saw that One Direction were, that they were so similar to other boy bands, I was like, oh, what is going on here? So yeah, I just found the whole thing quite interesting.
Yeah, there is that amazing moment when I was watching it. The sort of infrastructure of being a fan, because you have got people who are a fan of like the Beatles way back in the 60s all the way up to One Direction at the time, sort of like the most current. And then even since then, there's been more. The infrastructure of being a fan has changed, like the internet, there's, you know, streaming, all of those kind of things. But the actual core values of being a fan I was so struck by how exactly the same they were, like fan fiction, collecting photos, those kind of things. Was that something that you were expecting when you sort of met these fans?
Yeah, I don't think I could have known that, because for me, what was so interesting was the internet, that access that you had to, you know, at the time, the One Direction boys in the band, you could be tweeting at them and they would sometimes write back. And I saw both the pros and the cons of that, but it did make me think, would you, if you wrote a fan letter to John Lennon, was he ever going to write back? So unlikely. So I went into it thinking, you know, being a fan has changed a lot. And so that was, but I knew that I wanted to see different generations. So that was something that was so beautiful in the making of the film, was, like you say, how similar being a fan is. And I guess that translates to how similar being a teenager is, you know, over the last 60 years.
Because that was something that also really struck me, is that as well as sort of telling the story of these boy bands and the experience that these fans have with them, it's sort of a coming of age story as well. And you're sort of looking at all the different ways that we do come of age. So you have someone who's, you know, very much a teenager going into adulthood. You have people sort of in their second phase of like being a young adult, sort of figuring it out. And then you have someone who's older, sort of showing us the different phases that they have as well. What was your experience as sort of realizing that that was the story that you were telling alongside these fan stories?
So my very early ideas for the film, as I was saying, is that I felt like I wanted to cover the whole phenomena. So I wanted fans of every band to be represented. And we also, in the first year of the film, were interviewing psychologists and songwriters and, you know, stylists, because I wanted to understand what was going on in the creation of a boy band. And when we sat down to look at the footage, we realized that the fans that we'd interviewed were such strong characters. And by that time, I think I'd already spent more time with Alif and Sadia. And especially with Alif, she had changed so much. Year to year, she would change a lot. And while that wasn't the initial intention, I could just see that she was going through really interesting changes as a fan and as a person, and was welcoming me to be a part of that. And that's such an amazing privilege as a filmmaker to have subjects who want to share with you and are open with you. And all the other subjects were on board. So it just felt like a lovely opportunity to show, you know, a few years in a person's life. And that's most stark with Alif. Seeing someone from 16 to 18 is just amazing to see how much they change.
Yeah, it really, you can see how like visually they change, and just sort of in like attitude and maturity as well. She was really interesting to watch in the film. You sort of partially funded this film as well on Kickstarter, which I actually donated to way back in the day.
Oh, amazing. Thank you.
I was like, I need the boy band story told.
Did you know the Backstreet Boys also gave to the Kickstarter? So you're
Yes, I did read that. It feels sort of poetic in a way that is part of the origin story, because I feel like being a fan is so much to do with community and sort of like uplifting like-minded people, and also sort of really willing the world like to care so much. Like all you want is just for people to see the thing you care about and understand it, which I thought it was like a sort of poetic origin story for this film. So why were you so passionate about telling this specific story? Because I know that there was sort of pushback on not sensationalizing and stigmatizing fans in a way.
Yeah, I think that was, I really didn't feel like I'd seen a story about fans, not just boy band fans, but really fans of anything, that didn't make fun of them. And definitely being like, it can be funny, of course. It can be funny and it can be crazy, but that feels a very simplistic way to talk about being a fan. And so just really felt like there was a place for a film that treated them with respect.
That is something actually, because I do think that I realized about halfway through watching this film, I was like, wow, this is probably the longest I've seen sort of young women be openly talk about the things that they love without there being an eye roll, or without there being sort of any sort of like hint of derision with an edit choice like right after. It was just this really, I really loved the space that you gave your contributors to just talk and to sort of open up, because there is sort of a guarded element of sharing about the things that you love. Was that hard to ensure to them that you were gonna be sensitive to the things that they like?
Well, I think what really helped was that I was a fan. And maybe if I hadn't have been, if I just thought this was a good story, I don't know if the tone would have been the same, but because they all felt so comfortable. And I remember Sadia and Dara in particular, that feeling when they were talking to me of not so used to being judged when they were telling friends or colleagues that thing, like you say, being laughed at, for them to sit and say, wow, thank you for just, you know, not laughing at me. And like you say, talking about the thing that I love. And what's off screen is me sharing my own, you know, embarrassing stories, or, oh, I also felt like that. Or so it was a lovely dialogue that we had going on. And I think that they could tell they weren't being judged, which was a really refreshing thing, especially for the older fans.
Yeah, because that's very relatable, because I am also myself an older fan by sort of like the metrics of being a fan, I guess. And we're taught very young, I think, as young women, like you go from you're too young for me to take your interest seriously to you're too old for these interests to be taken seriously, like overnight. Like there's no middle ground really of being able to just enjoy it when you're in this sort of older fan age. Was it fun letting them open up, and also you as well, because I'm guessing, like you said, you were able to share your stories as well of this phenomenon in your life?
I think as much of it was me needing an outlet because, you know, I had friends who would listen if I wanted to, you know, discuss you know, the latest video clip or something, but no one to actually share it with. And I think when I look back now at the fans that I chose, I think they're fans who are a little bit isolated in their fandom, because a big part of being a fan is often, you know, sharing it with your friends or having a best friend that you share it with. But because I didn't have that, and they didn't all have it either, I felt like we could be that for each other.
Yeah, well, that's so nice. Have you, obviously, because you said you started this process in 2011, it's now 2021, you were with these contributors for a long time. Do you still sort of feel like you're on a journey with them through every step that every lifespan this film has?
I actually was just texting with Elif this week because she just graduated from college. So it's funny because the film is my whole life, but I think for them it was just a little blip. But it's nice I do check in with them, you know, throughout the year, and I feel very connected to them. And I think they all care about the film as well. It was funny because they were all, you know, they all come from different cities, but I felt like they were a family, even though they never were actually all in the same room at the same time. The closest we got was 3 out of 4. But yeah, there's this real connection between them that even though they never met, they care about each other too.
Amazing. Are there any particular moments from the film that you really love, that you are like so glad that you captured, that you are so glad you're able to show people?
I don't know if it's a moment on the film, but a moment for me, we were filming with Elif on a beach in Long Island when she's playing her guitar. And I was filming that, and we were on the beach, and I just started crying, which is very hard when you're you're holding a camera to your eye. But I just felt, she at that time just felt so unsure of herself, and I just felt like she was seen, to have the camera on her in this beautiful lighting, letting her play her guitar, you know, making her feel like a star, even though they were only, you know, it was only me and Rita on the beach and her, but it just felt like such a special moment. So often, like you say, teenage girls, what do people listen to them talk about? They don't really get the time. And in film, if you see a young woman, is she on camera because she's a victim, or like why is she on screen? It's probably for something sad that she's sharing. So just to give her this outlet to talk about what she loved and celebrate this moment in her life, I really hold that memory dear, because then she started crying, and it was just a very special, that's a wonderful thing about documentaries, having that intimacy that you only need. It can be just you and the subject. You know, that's technology has meant that you can capture it all yourself. So I feel really lucky to have shared that moment.
That was a really lovely moment in the film as well, actually. I picked up on that, just the shot of her with the guitar on the beach. But yeah, I think the space given to people to talk is something that I really loved about this documentary. And when I saw the runtime and I was like, oh, it's just going to be 4 people talking about the things they love for this long, I was like, oh, this is my dream. Like, I love that more than anything in the world. Like, even sort of since this film wrapped, you know, we've had, like we said, the sort of infrastructure has changed even more. Like, social media is even more now than it was. We've also just come out of a year, I think, where social media is like even bigger in our lives. Would you ever be tempted to sort of go back and tell a different fan experience story? I know that the original idea was stripped back anyway from what you originally thought.
Yeah, we did at screenings. We would have early, like, fans standing up being like, why isn't New Kids on the Block in there? Why isn't, you know, everyone wanted their voice heard. And also it was early on when the film came out. I feel like it was relatively early in K-pop becoming a lot more mainstream. And so lots of people were saying, why isn't K-pop in there? But it felt like that needed to be even its own, you know, that could be its whole own film. So yeah, I think there's definitely a space for films that talk about fans as real people, and, you know, let them share their stories. And yeah, there's so many funny boy bands from the past, and there's going to be forever more boy bands, hopefully. The world needs boy bands, I think, when times are hard.
Oh yeah, I mean, I agree with that wholeheartedly. Did you sort of lean back into your fandom days at all when you were, I guess, when you go through the lifespan of promoting this film, and I guess in the last year we've had, do you find yourself leaning on the thing that you were a fan of in the first place that made you want to make this film?
Yeah, the music is such a good form of therapy. So yeah, if I am sad, One Direction will always help me shift my mood. And you know, also songs from your teenage years you can always rely on. But yeah, I just find the music gives me such good feelings of the journey that I had with the film, as well as the good feelings I had about being on the journey with the band, watching them evolve. So I feel really lucky to have that as a you know, a check-in thing for myself, because making this film I realized there are people who don't listen to music in that way or use music in that way. It might be background noise, or they haven't really listened to lyrics. And so for someone who does feel things that way, I just feel really lucky to connect with music and have found things in my life that I want to obsess over, because I think you're really lucky if you do find things that get you excited.
Oh yeah, it's the best feeling in the world when you like find something to be excited about and you're like, there's this whole world that was parallel to my world that I didn't even know about, and now I can dive in. Like, what a joy for me to have this. Yeah, I think the title of the film says it all, like, I used to be normal. When you do find those things you obsess over, and it sort of like alters your brain chemistry a little bit, and you're like, oh wow, I used to not be this way. And now I am. It is just such an interesting thing, and I really loved in it seeing the way that progresses through life, because you obviously have your fan who's a fan of the Beatles, who is a little bit, you know, more removed from it in a because she's older, she's had life experience in a different way, but it's always sort of there, and a really important part of your brain as well. And like you said, nostalgia is to do with that too.
It's funny how, I know football is huge here, and I know it is there too, that boys can talk about their teams all the time and have posters on their wall and like wear the jersey, you know, down the street. But girls, I remember there were times when I thought, do I feel comfortable enough to wear a One Direction t-shirt down the street? You would never think that, you know, if it was your football team, or you would never be embarrassed to bring it up at a dinner, or it just seems really unfair that, and football fans speak very passionately, are very emotional, But yeah, they're afforded lots more privileges than boy band fans are.
Yeah, that's something that I'm very passionate about as well, is just the level of judgment we just give young women, especially for the things that they care about. I mean, I recently moved into my new flat and I was like, how many K-pop posters can I put on the wall that's like appropriate before it becomes like a little bit strange? Striking that balance. But yeah, there's always an underlying sort of shell to how much you show the world, which again, I thought was just so wonderful about this film, is just the space that was given to your contributors. And do you feel like it was a sort of healing process for them as well to have this outlet?
I want to say yes. But I think for Sadie, it was probably the hardest to actually put down on, camera forever how she feels. And I think she still is trying to deal with the love-hate relationship she has with the Backstreet Boys. And that's what makes her such an amazing character. But I know that's something that she's still dealing with. Whereas the other fans, Dara and Susan in particular, are very, very comfortable with their fandom. And Alif is still evolving, I think.
Yeah, it was that's the Backstreet Boys sort of story. I thought was so interesting because, it isn't as black and white as like, this is great, this is bad, celebrate things because they're amazing in every single way. There is a complicated relationship with being sort of obsessed with things and not recognizing yourself in moments of hysteria and those kind of things. I thought the introspective nature of how she spoke about her fandom was really interesting, and again, not something that we let women do very often, which is sort of be critical about their own interests, and because that also implies that they have agency over it. Do you know what I mean? Because we just dismiss them, we don't let people be critical of them, which I thought was really interesting.
And that's the earlier version of the film. Did, like I said, had some experts. We interviewed experts, and when we first sat down and put the experts alongside the fans, it became very clear that you didn't need the experts because the fans were experts themselves. They could analyze themselves way better than someone who'd never met them or just had an idea of what a fangirl was. So yeah, like you say, they were very introspective, and you're very smart and very honest about what being a fan does or did for them.
Yeah, who knows someone's brain better than the person who's in it all the time? Well, this has been amazing. I look forward to any sort of boy band stories you want to tell in the future, because there are so many, like you said, so many routes that you can go down. Is there anything else that you'd want to say about your film for anyone who hasn't seen it, who's looking forward to seeing it?
We had our US premiere at the film festival Fantastic Fest, which is a film festival for kind of genre films, lots of horror films, and so the audience that went to see the film was not necessarily boy band fans, but they could see themselves in the film. So I think I would love people to see it who are fans of anything, because I think it's really fun to see how similar it is. And I think also we've had wonderful responses from people who, like me and like lots of people, were very dismissive of being a fan. I remember at the time we got lots of messages from people saying, I wish I could go back in time and apologize to my teenage sister, because, I didn't realize how important this was to her. I just made fun of her, our entire childhood. So yeah, I know it's definitely a fun film for people who are already boy band fans. But yeah, reaching people on the outside of that is really fun for me.
It is so true that it's similar behaviors sort of replicated across different things. I have a podcast where people talk about the things that they're a fan of, and I've had people come and talk about Marvel, and they're like, well, I can't, I feel like I can't like DC because I like Marvel so much, or I can't like Star Trek because I like Star Wars. Which is something that I saw in the film where it's like, I can't like NSYNC because I like the Backstreet Boys. And it's just it's these sort of unwritten rules that are replicated across whatever fandom there is, whatever sort of genre that is out there. It's so fascinating.
One of my favorites was heavy metal fans who would say, who could see themselves in it. So as music genres, you wouldn't think they're similar, but I think that's also a fandom who gets judged. You think why a heavy metal fan likes the music or what they're like, but you know, you have no idea what the music means to them or the journey they've been on as a fan. So that's been really fun for me when heavy metal fans say, oh, I really like saw myself in these characters.
I love that, the heavy metal boy band fan, like the handshake emoji. It's like, we're in this together.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. This was a great way to spend my day. I loved it.
Thank you.
You can watch I Used to Be Normal, a boy band fangirl story on the BFI player now. If you enjoyed this event, please consider subscribing to the BFI YouTube channel for more Q&As. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.